outstanding effort again.
We're busting ours to kick yours.
That's big time.
Minus 15.
Respect all, fear none.
Oh, did he belt that one?
Intensity is not a perfume.
It was a no-doubter.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
The Orioles Draft Show on MASN All Access is presented by Long Fence. Touch all the bases and score big. For great savings, visit longfence.com. Hello everyone, and welcome into our MASN All Access studios for an exciting night here in Birdland. It's draft night for the Orioles, and they have 4 selections in the top 37 at number 19, 30, 31, and 37. So a golden opportunity to bolster this farm system. They're hoping the 2024 draft class is going to do the same. Here's a look back at last year's selections.
Loud Tools. That was the book on Vance Honeycutt, an outfielder from North Carolina that the Orioles selected 22nd overall in last year's MLB Draft. According to MLB Pipeline, the center fielder had at least a 60 grade in his power, run, arm, and field tools. But like any prospect selected later in the first round, there were some question marks. For Honeycutt, it was his bat-to-ball skills and a strikeout rate that will need to come down as he develops. Honeycutt is working to find some more consistency in Aberdeen, as is Griff O'Farrell, the 32nd overall pick that the Orioles had because of a prospect promotion incentive. O'Farrell wasn't the same mold as Honeycutt. He didn't have a lot of loud tools, but he did a lot of things that the O's liked from a hitter. Great swing decisions without many strikeouts, and great defense in the middle of the diamond, too. The Virginia product couldn't escape his college roommate, though. Ethan Anderson was Baltimore's second-round pick, a switch-hitting catcher out of UVA. He backed up Kyle Teal for most of his college days, and Pro Ball has given him the opportunity to work more behind the dish. Austin Overn brought the speed, 97th overall, to the Orioles with a bit of an Enrique Bradfield Jr. light profile. And this year, he could challenge Bradfield's 74 stolen bases from his first pro season. Overn's athleticism as a former USC wide receiver could carry him far. Now, I know, none of those first 4 names were pitchers, but a lot of selections later in the draft were used on arms. The Orioles just didn't stray away from their tried-and-true strategy of selecting position players. It's early to evaluate this draft class, but enough time has passed to look back on some of the early draft classes of the Mike Elias era. And if you want some reassurance that drafting position players has been the way to go, look no further than the first Elias draft in 2019. The first 8 selections by Baltimore were position players, and 6 of them have made the major leagues. Adley Rutschman and Gunnar Henderson were all-stars, and Joey Ortiz and Kyle Stowers were used to help acquire Corbin Burns and Trevor Rogers. So drafting bats can still wind up getting you pitching talent. The Orioles have 3 picks in the top 31 in 2025, with a golden opportunity to give a huge boost to their farm system.
That 2024 draft class looking to make some noise down in Aberdeen, and the Orioles have a chance to draft 4 prospects in the top 37 that could make some major noise down on the farm. I'm Brendan Mortensen, joined now by my co-host Annie Klaff. And Annie, it is a huge night here in Birdland. The Orioles with a massive opportunity here with this many picks towards the top of the draft.
Right, Brendan, and this draft is very different for the Orioles in recent years past, especially at the start of the Mike Elias era, when they had the luxury of picking super early on in the first round. But now it's kind of the opposite. They have the later picks, but a number of them. You mentioned those 4 picks in the 30s range, and then that first 19th pick in the first round. So definitely an opportunity to bolster that farm system with 4 shots to do so.
Yeah, they sit at number 19. The Orioles didn't really have a great chance of getting too many guys projected to go in the top 10, but it was a bit of a surprising top 10. There was a surprising pick at number 1 overall to the Washington Nationals, and then kind of, Annie, just a flat-out shocking pick at number 2 to the Los Angeles Angels.
Right, Tyler Bremner is who went number 2 overall to the Angels, and this is a pitcher who has arguably some of the best control in this entire draft class. But you're right, he kind of snuck up in there into that top 10 as we were getting closer and closer to draft day. We saw some more rankings where he was sneaking up into that higher end range and more earlier on. But also, there's some other guys that I'm sure the Orioles, if they did have that luxury of picking earlier on, like Steele Hall, JoJo Parker, those are guys that would fit this Orioles position player mold. And this draft class right now is very heavy and deep with high school hitters, so those are 2 of the best.
Yeah, you mentioned a few of the names right there. JoJo Parker goes 8th overall, Steele Hall goes 9th, Billy Carlson goes 10th. Those are 3 high school shortstops that the Orioles would have loved to target, but there are plenty of them in this draft and plenty of top talent for the Orioles potentially available at number 19. I caught up with draft expert Joe Doyle to talk about some of the top prospects.
Yeah, I would say right about where the Orioles are going to select is where you're going to see this run on high school shortstops start to come off the board. If we look at who's going to be available, you look at the Steele Halls, you look at the Daniel Pierces, you look at the Xavier Nyans, the Gavin Fiends, the Josh Hammonds. Like, those are the types of players that I think are going to be there. And this is a very strong class for high school shortstops. I mean, I've got 9 high school shortstops. If you want to include Ethan Holiday and you want to include Gavin Fiend, who I think will ultimately be third baseman, if you want to include them in the high school shortstop bucket, I have 9 high school shortstops in my top 20 overall prospects right now. And, one thing the Orioles have done over the course of the last couple of years, over the last handful of years, is they have leaned into the strength of a draft. They have gone after the demographic that is going to provide the most fruit in that draft. So it wouldn't surprise me if a run on high school shortstops started at the 14, 15, 16 range. If the Orioles made an emphasis to go in and get one of those high school shortstops at 19. But as a whole, this draft, it's a little bit lighter on college hitters, and I think you're going to see college hitters go later in this class. You're going to see college hitters go in the 15 to 30, 15 to 40 range. So Baltimore is positioned uniquely to capture potentially some of the more intriguing college hitters in this class. We know that Baltimore doesn't like to go after college pitching. I don't know if they're going to have a lot of access to college pitching with where they're selecting. So I would expect that high school shortstop class and, some of those advantageous college position players that are going to fall down the board a little bit to be targets for Baltimore.
Yeah, I mean, that seems to be right up Baltimore's alley. We're talking about high school shortstops and good college hitters. Those are the two pools that the Orioles like to select from. We'll start with the high schoolers because there are 2 names I wanted to ask you about, Xavier Nyans and Kason Cunningham. They're very different players. They're both left-handed hitting high schoolers, but Nyans is more of a power profile, Cunningham a bit more of a hit tool profile. Tell me about those 2 guys.
Yeah, I think Nyans is especially interesting with what they've done in the past. They've gone after guys with hit tool concerns, but big frames and big power. I mean, you just look at what they were able to create with Gunnar Henderson. You got to start somewhere, right? Now, Nyans is interesting in that he had the lowest, to my knowledge, of guys that had 50 plate appearances last summer. I believe he had the lowest chase rate of any of them. Now, that does come with the precursor that he was pretty passive and he didn't want to pull the trigger, and that's going to come when you don't swing the bat a whole bunch. But if you just go based off of what they've targeted in the past, Xavier Nyans makes a lot of sense with the power and the tools and playing on the dirt and that selective approach. Cunningham is another one that I think kind of fits right in that 19 range. A very, very decorated hitter, extremely impressive bat-to-ball skills, a selective approach, not as selective as some of the guys that they've gone after in the past. He can get a little bit aggressive and get outside of the zone at times, but the thing that Cunningham has over Nyans is he's probably going to play shortstop. He's probably going to play second base. There's athletic tools there. He can run. Posted one of the more impressive run times in the 30-yard dash at the combine. So I wouldn't be surprised if either one of these players ended up being a Baltimore Oriole with that 19th overall selection.
Yeah, 2 guys that seem to fit the mold for the Orioles in the MLB Draft over the past few seasons. Now, there are 2 bigger names on the college side that I want to ask you about as well. The first one being Jace Laviolette, the outfielder from Texas A&M. Coming into the season, we were talking about this guy as a potential number 1 overall pick based on what he did after his sophomore season. Junior year, bit of a step back. What did you see from him this season, and why are we talking about him as somebody who could potentially be available at pick 19?
I think the misnomer about Jace Laviolette is that he backed up this year. And I understand that the baseball card makes it look like he backed up, but in essence, he just didn't take a step forward. He came into the year with hit tool concerns and whip concerns, and they really just kind of sustained. They were where they were for most of his collegiate career. But the thing about Laviolette that I think makes a lot of sense for Baltimore, 17% chase rate, right? Like, he's a very selective hitter, passive at times, especially against left-handed pitching. But this is up the middle. It's center field. It's big batted ball data. It's a selective approach. I mean, this is a lot of what we saw with Vance Honeycutt. Now, will they do the Vance Honeycutt experiment twice in 2 years? I don't know, because, Vance Honeycutt's assimilation, like I was saying, to professional baseball hasn't been great. And generally guys that have strikeout concerns over the course of their collegiate careers do have a tough time adjusting to the pro game. So I would just kind of be surprised from this chair if Baltimore went center field, center field, center field with their first pick 3 years in a row. At some point, you've got to fill up the rest of the roster, and Laviolette comes with enough concerns where I think you could maybe go a different direction.
Yeah, and if they do go in a different direction that's not a center fielder, there's a Golden Spikes Award winner at shortstop who could be available at number 19, and that is Vahiva Aloy, the shortstop from Arkansas. Talk about big batted ball data there. Tell me more about him.
Yeah, Aloy, so listen, you got to fill out the middle of the field. You got to fill out the shortstop position. I understand that Baltimore is already in a fantastic place at the shortstop position, but Aloy might be the best defender out of anybody in that organization. That includes Holiday, that includes Henderson, that includes Mateo, that includes anybody that you want to put at the shortstop position. This is a plus glove. It's a plus throwing arm. It's a pro-ready body. I mean, he's built like a horse. He is a pro-ready shortstop. Again, the reason that I'm a little bit hesitant to throw Aloy into the Baltimore mix is it was a 30% chase rate. And I understand. I'm leaning on this so heavily in this podcast. But like I said, if you don't lean on history and you don't go off what they've done in the past, specifically a team like Baltimore that has been so model reliant over the course of the Mike Elias era, I just don't really know what tools you're using at your disposal. So, yeah, Aloy hits the ball really, really hard, but there are bat to ball concerns. There is an approach concern. But at the end of the day, like, this is one of the better shortstop prospects in the class, so I certainly wouldn't rule it out.
So, Joe, I threw 4 names at you. Throw some names at me, guys that I haven't mentioned that could be on the radar for Baltimore.
Yeah, I mean, the first guy that I point to personally is Andrew Fisher at Tennessee. From everything that I've heard, Andrew Fisher absolutely blew the interview portions of the MLB Draft Combine out of the water. He was one of the most impressive guys there. It's extremely impressive bat-to-ball skills. It's extremely impressive barrel rates. It's a 17% chase rate. The only question I think with Fisher is what's the ceiling, right? Because he's playing first base at Tennessee. He wasn't really given the opportunity to play third base this year at Tennessee. I would be interested in seeing if he would get that shot in Baltimore. But if you're going off models, if you're going off of, who is the most polished, highest floor, checks all the boxes player in this class, I think it would be Fisher. But like I said, my only hesitation there is there's not a lot of athletic value in Fisher. The other one that I would say would probably be Dean Curley, the shortstop at Tennessee. Tennessee's got a pretty good stockpile of players this year. Curley, up the middle player, could play shortstop, could play second base. It's above average to plus raw power. It's above average feel for the barrel. Again, it's a 16% chase rate, comes with some passivity. But I think when you're looking at these players who work long counts, who wait for their pitches, who swing at the right pitches, Tennessee's just got a couple of them. So those would be 2 guys that I would watch for. Lesser, I would say Kane Kepley at North Carolina and Luke Stevenson at North Carolina. Keep in mind, Matt Blood, a Tar Heel for life, and he's the one that is in charge of making those picks. And so both of those guys, low chase rates with some tools up the middle of the field. I'd circle their names as well.
One of those Tennessee products that Joe mentioned, Gavin Keelan, off the board to the San Francisco Giants with the 13th pick. Another college position player that was a possibility for Baltimore, Merrick Houston, just goes off the board to the Minnesota Twins at number 16. Annie, one guy that Joe did mention and has been mocked to the Orioles a bunch, Texas A&M outfielder Jace Laviolette. He's got a ton of power, and he's a great athlete.
Right, this guy is arguably your favorite and my favorite for this draft for the Orioles. He fits kind of all 5 boxes that the Orioles would want. He doesn't chase too much. He's a lefty college bat. He plays up the middle or down the middle, but he also has some experience in a corner outfield spot. He is athletic, a big physical frame. He's at 6'6", 230 pounds, and you also mentioned that power. This guy is arguably one of the best pure power hitters in this entire draft class, so I think that this guy would really fit the mold for number 19.
One player that we were not anticipating talking about because we thought he would be well off the board right now, that is Auburn catcher outfield hybrid Ike Irish. We're talking one of the top prospects in this draft. He was ranked 5th on the Athletics Top 100. That's a whale of a player, and I don't think anybody anticipated him being available in the mid-teens here, as the Cubs are now on the board and on the clock with number 17. Ike Irish is still here. There's no saying he gets to the Orioles at number 19, but he wasn't even really part of our discussion.
Yeah, this guy is someone that I personally am surprised is still around, but he's another one that the Orioles could draft, and I would be totally not surprised if they fall to the Orioles. But this is another college batter, position player with a lot of positional value. You mentioned that outfield and catcher, kind of both perspective there. But he also has experience on the Cape Cod Baseball League, which is huge for a team like the Orioles, who follow models and stats, for someone that you can kind of trust the transition going into the big leagues and professional ball. Now, there was some doubts on Ike Irish's play in the Cape Cod Baseball League. Yes, he batted 325 batting average, but at the same time, only 2 home runs. So there are some concerns on how the wooden bat will translate for him, but some scouts do feel that he could kind of translate to a 20-plus home run season type of guy.
Yeah, if you're not familiar with the Cape Cod Baseball League, that is the summer league where typically the best college players in the nation will go, and they get experience with wood bats against other really good college pitchers. And that gives you a good idea about, like you said, Annie, how that power might translate. But he did hit 325, so that's a pretty good indication of the kind of plate approach that he would potentially bring at the next level. A couple of high school hitters that we want to touch on as well. Xavier Nyans is a name that has been tied to the Orioles a lot, kind of like Jace Laviolette, a left-handed bat with a ton of power upside.
Right, I'm glad you mentioned the comparison to Jace Laviolette, because this is also a favorite of mine. And I mentioned that the checking the box with Jace Laviolette, that he doesn't chase too much. Nyans is the exact same way, an 11% chase rate. We know that the Orioles tend to like guys like that with advanced and mature plate approaches, and Nyans is also that type of guy. Also to mention, he is very physical, and a guy that the Orioles can look towards comparisons with Gunnar Henderson, Kobe Mayo, an infielder in that respect, for having physical frames in the infield defense category, but also this guy is one of the best power hitters like Jace Laviolette.
Yeah, 2 big physical athletes. And if we're going to stick with our one-to-one comparisons here, we talked about Ike Irish, who hit 364 in his junior year at Auburn. And there's another high school hitter on the board in Kason Cunningham, who many consider to have the best plate approach of any high school hitter in this draft. He can hit for a great average. He doesn't chase. He's another possibility as well.
Cunningham is very different from Xavier Nyans in that respect, where he isn't necessarily a power hitter like Nyans and Laviolette are, but Kason Cunningham is a hit over impact kind of guy, a contact over impact guy. So this one is another really great pick if you wanted the Orioles to go towards some pure hitting ability. Kason Cunningham is one of those guys, and I also really like his ball player mentality. That is one thing that he used to describe himself at the MLB Combine, and that we know that the intangibles are just as important as the tools and the numbers for a player. So Kason Cunningham is another really great pick.
Yeah, Kason Cunningham, if you want to go for just the bat and the average potential, he could be your guy. Now, we haven't mentioned any pitchers, and we see your comments as you are following along with our MASN Orioles Facebook and YouTube pages. This is the Orioles process. This is what they like to do. They tend to draft bats and then maybe trade for the arms down the line. And Annie, you took a look at just how the Orioles have been doing that over the last few seasons.
What does it mean for you guys to have 4 picks relatively early on and close together?
Yeah, the biggest thing is that we got one more stab, and we'll get one more of the top 30-ish players in our country. And that is good news for the Orioles of the future.
And for the kind of value that the 4th pick brings, and now the Orioles too in general are just at the top of all MLB teams for bonus pool amounts, what does that say to you guys in terms of flexibility and navigating those 4 picks and beyond? Yeah, it's true. It gives you a little bit more flexibility. You could get a little bit more creative with some of the draft dynamics. But again, like the biggie is that
we got one more of the best 30 players in the country, and that by far is the advantage of that.
Do you view these 4 picks, I mentioned that flexibility, do you view them as, okay, we're going to go out and try and get different players because we have 4 shots now, or is it kind of just best player available for each one?
I think whether you got 1 pick, 4 picks, whether it's your last pick, your goal is still the same, and it's to take the best available player. They're going to be put into our low minor leagues. They're going to join players from other drafts, and after a couple of years, you'll forget exactly what draft or where they came from, and it's all really just trying to get the best player to help the Orioles out here.
Now, for good reason, this Orioles team hasn't necessarily been drafting earlier on in the draft in the first round the last couple of years, but there has been some success with this organization in drafting later on in the first round and even beyond, like Gunnar Henderson, Jordan Westberg. What does that kind of precedent for you guys tell you in terms of confidence for these later picks?
Yeah, you know what? I'd like to think that we're strong and our decision-making processes are good throughout the draft, but you're right. We have had a couple hits in this area, so I'm with you. Let's imagine a few more hits coming in the future.
Last year, before the 2024 draft, you mentioned that you kind of like, with your draft process, having some sense of modesty. Can you elaborate more on that, and do you still feel the same way?
Yeah, I definitely feel the same way. I think being involved in the draft is not the best fit for an overconfident human being. And the draft will humble you. There's still so much variability, so much of the future of what becomes of these players that we can't figure out on draft day. And so much of it is an exercise in squeezing all the information we can and making the best decision we can, and then letting real life take it from there.
And you are a big...
Well, the Orioles are officially on the clock with the 19th pick in this MLB draft. Kason Cunningham, a name we just talked about, goes 18th to the Arizona Diamondbacks, but still plenty of guys that have been linked to the Orioles are still on the board. A bit of a plummet here for Ike Irish continues. He is available for Baltimore at number 19, along with Jace Laviolette, Xavier Nyans, a name we have heard a lot too. Another name, Annie, that we have heard potentially as a number 30, 31 pick, but could be an option here for the O's at number 19, is Tennessee product Andrew Fisher. First baseman, great hit tool, great power tool. He doesn't bring the positional value that the Orioles tend to go with, a shortstop or a center fielder, but he brings just about everything you could want in a hitter.
Andrew Fisher is a really, really cool player. He does not, like you mentioned, bring the defensive value there. He would probably fit in as a first baseman. Joe Doyle, when you talked to him earlier in the week, said that there was a chance that you could see him at third base. But again, you're not really drafting Andrew Fisher for the defense. You would be getting him for the bat. He reached base in all of 65 games this year for Tennessee. Once he's on base and he just gets going, this is another kind of power hitter like a Jace Laviolette and a Xavier Nyans that we mentioned. Those two guys also bring a little bit more on the defensive side, but Andrew Fisher you are most definitely drafting for the bat because he will produce as much as you can get out of him.
And speaking of a potential power hitter, there's also the Golden Spikes Award winner still on the board. That award goes to the best player in amateur baseball. This year, it went to Arkansas shortstop Vahiva Aloy. That guy put up some unbelievable stats in 2025, hit .350, 21 homers, and OPS over 1,100. If the Orioles want to go with yet another shortstop, Vahiva Aloy could be the pick here as well.
And I mentioned what Joe Doyle said earlier before the first round even began, but he also mentioned that Vahiva Aloy could probably slot in as one of the best defensive shortstops on this Orioles roster right now. So we kind of talked a little bit about Andrew Fisher, who doesn't bring a lot of defensive upside. Vahiva Aloy would most certainly do that. One thing that there are concerns with on Aloy are the chase rates, and we do know that the Orioles tend to sway a little bit away from that. We noticed with Vance Honeycutt last year that they dipped a little bit into that in the swing and miss rates, but Vahiva Aloy, there are some question marks around the chasing there, but again, like you mentioned, he is an all-around player and big league competitor that will be one day.
Yeah, the chase rates are certainly there, but that's just kind of what you get out of an aggressive hitter sometimes, and for Vahiva Aloy, that plate approach certainly paid off. We should mention pitchers because the Orioles have 4 picks in the top 37. One of these guys could be an arm. There are a few arms available that the Orioles could go with, one of which Anthony Ianson out of LSU. He could be the guy as well.
Yeah, there are definitely a number of arms, and with 4 picks in the first 37, that we could totally see one of those there, but not necessarily for this number 19 pick.
Well, Annie, the pick is in, and it is Ike Irish, the catcher outfield hybrid out of Auburn. This is a guy who, again, we were not even expecting to talk about as a possibility for the Orioles at number 19. Everywhere you saw this guy projected as a top 10 pick. Matt Blood has said it in all of our conversations. Somebody is going to fall to us, and we're going to be really happy about it. Ike Irish falls to the Orioles at number 19.
It definitely just goes to say how much importance there is of the best player available, because I'm sure Matt Blood and this entire Orioles front office also did not expect him to fall this much to pick number 19, but this is a guy that you are getting for that power. He has 50 grade power and 55 grade hit tool as well, so you're getting a little bit of both there with Ike Irish. A 710 slugging in his college 2025 season and an OPS over 1100 as well. So I think that this is a really, really solid pick for the Orioles, and when you get someone like this that was ranked so highly and falls down to pick number 19, how can you not be happy?
Now, he caught at the beginning of the season. He gets hit by a pitch, fractures his scapula, and then plays a lot of outfield. So it's a bit of a tricky evaluation because the numbers are so good for this catcher. A 364 batting average, slugged 710 with an OPS close to 1200, 19 homers, 33 walks, 37 strikeouts. But do you see him as a corner outfielder? Do you see him as a catcher? I'm sure that's a question that the Orioles will have an answer to, because if you see him as a catcher, this is a potential top 10 pick in this draft. A ton of upside, because at that position, if you're a pretty good defender, which Ike Irish is, and you can hit the baseball, you have a chance to be a star at the next level. There are just not too many catchers that have those solid traits. If you view him as a corner outfielder, okay, where does the power come from? Is it enough of an arm to fit long-term in a corner outfield? So it's a bit of a tricky evaluation, but the Orioles clearly believe that, hey, whatever position this guy plays, he's just going to be a good baseball player wherever we put him.
And that's definitely going to be the question that they're going to answer. And we know that when it comes to MLB Draft and the minor league system, that it takes a really long time, because development is a really huge and crucial part to this sport compared to other sports in the professional sports world. But with Ike Irish, I think regardless of where you get him as an outfielder or as a catcher, you are really also getting a really strong person on offense and at the plate, and someone that is very, very approached in that entire offensive skill set. And I think that is huge when it comes to the traits of players that the Orioles draft in the first round.
Ike Irish, one of the best prospects in this draft, falls to the Orioles at number 19. Now, we are far from done. The Orioles have 2 more picks coming up pretty shortly at number 30 and at number 31, and we are going to stick with you here on MASN All Access. In just a few minutes, we're going to be in the podcast room. Stick with us there. We're going to watch the draft with you. We're going to continue to talk about Ike Irish as the Orioles selection at number 19. And we'll be back in here for picks 30 and 31. So we're going to go podcast for a while, and then we'll be back. We've got a marathon of a show for you here, so make sure you stick with us. But the Orioles select another position player with their first round pick. Ike Irish goes 19th overall to the Baltimore Orioles. And we know from a track record now of draft picks under Mike Elias and Sig Mejdal and Matt Blood, the kind of hitter that the Orioles tend to go for. I took a look at what traits to keep an eye on.
It's the 7th MLB draft of the Mike Elias era, and few teams in baseball have done it better. 3 All-Stars in Adley Rutschman, Gunnar Henderson, and Jordan Westburg, and ascending talents like Colton Cowser, Jackson Holliday, and Kobe Mayo. There's plenty of reason for optimism when the draft rolls around with this front office at the helm. 7 years in, there's a big enough sample to try and find some similarities in these draft picks. On the surface, prospects like Heston Kjerstad and Enrique Bradfield Jr. look like completely different players. They are different archetypes, but finding some similarities could paint a picture as to what the Orioles might do with their first selections this year. So let's Sherlock Holmes this thing. We'll try to find some clues that'll tell us about this year's draft picks, and we'll power rank some traits. Now, remember, every team in baseball would love a prospect that's good at everything, but that's just not always possible. So maybe some archetypes are just valued by Baltimore more than others. That's what we're trying to see. So we'll start back in 2019 with the number 1 overall pick. Rutschman was a slam dunk prospect with an on-base percentage close to 617 home runs in his junior year at Oregon State. Just ridiculous numbers for the best college baseball player in the nation. His scouting reports on MLB Pipeline and Baseball America raved about his advanced approach at the plate, rarely expanding the zone, and the ability to make hard contact. Henderson was further down the prospect rankings, but Pipeline noted his hard contact too. And Baseball America thought there was potential to hit for average. Yeah, I'd say so. Both were good athletes with upside defensively. It's the first draft class. Let's cast a wide net. We'll jot down a good plate approach, hard contact, defensive upside, and a good athlete at a premium position. That's a lot of traits, but it's a good place to start. The selection of Kjerstad in 2020 narrows things down a bit. The Arkansas product could absolutely destroy the baseball, and he hit for average, but there wasn't much defensive upside in a corner outfield. Still had a cannon for an arm, though. MLB Pipeline noted Westberg's power upside, and Baseball America called him an impressive athlete. Scouts seemed to be mixed about whether or not he could stick at shortstop, but felt confident in his ability at third base. Both guys had an aggressive approach at the plate, which showed improved walk and strikeout rates. All right, let's move some things around. Rutschman and Kjerstad were good athletes, but they were more bat over speed. Kjerstad, too, was in a corner outfield rather than center, and Henderson and Westberg had some questions at shortstop. But all 4 guys could absolutely mash. So after 2 drafts, here's our power rankings. Hard contact at the top, followed by plate approach. Then we'll go with defensive upside, speed and athleticism, and finally, a premium position. On to the next. That's where we find Cowser. And with all due respect, he doesn't help very much, because scouts pretty much said this is a safe, 5-tool potential prospect. He did everything well. Some of the top things of note about the center fielder were his plate approach and ability to find the barrel. He was really heralded for that approach, so we'll at least switch our top 2. Plate approach takes the top spot, followed by hard contact. Then it's defensive upside, speed and athleticism, and a premium position. No change there. Now the next year, we're back to the number 1 overall pick, where the Orioles selected Jackson Holliday, who, according to MLB Pipeline, by the way, was not even the number 1 prospect in that class. But I think Baltimore feels pretty good about their selection. And guess what Pipeline had to say about the shortstop? An advanced approach at the plate, a knack for finding the barrel, and the ability to make consistent hard contact. Can we get those top 2 traits in italics? Plate approach and hard contact are running away with this thing. But it gets more interesting from here. No number 1 pick, no top 5, no top 10. For the last 2 years, the Orioles have been in the back half of the first round. And with those selections, the O's have found some guys with a few elite traits, but some question marks. That's just what you're going to get without a high pick. For Enrique Bradfield Jr., the speed and athleticism were off the charts. He was getting Kenny Lofton comparisons for wreaking havoc on the base paths. So maybe you're thinking, hey, did we italicize those top 2 traits too early? I'm not so sure. Baseball America noted Bradfield's solid understanding of the strike zone and his, quote, sneaky exit velocities. Pipeline called it sneaky pop. Not too sneaky for us to find, keep the italics, but we'll move speed and athleticism up a spot. Bradfield's defense was elite too, but that's in large part due to the speed and athleticism. He was at a position of value too. Now here's where things get a little tricky. We've gone from 2019 to 2024, and last year's first-round pick, Vance Honeycutt, is the only one that deviated from that model a little bit. There were some question marks on the plate approach, but the power was elite, as was the speed and athleticism, and defensive upside at a premium position. So I think our clear winner is hard contact. Even Bradfield and his sneaky exit velocity still qualify. Hit the ball hard, that's a good place to start. Italics, underline. Now, despite Honeycutt's question marks, we're going to keep plate approach in italics, just not underlined. We're going to add speed and athleticism to that tier too. Now, if you're shouting from the rooftops that Bradfield and Honeycutt were two of the best defenders in college baseball, I hear you. But factoring in guys like Henderson and Westberg, I think the defense is a nice addition to being a top-tier athlete rather than the other way around. So defense and a premium position go in the third tier. Still important, the Orioles like to draft up the middle, just maybe not the deciding factor. So if you've got a list of 20 guys that the Orioles could select, and 5 of them don't make hard contact, maybe you've narrowed down your list a little bit. And then we'll move to that plate approach and speed and athleticism and so on. There could be a trait lower down the list that is just so elite that it outweighs one higher than it, but hey, we're just trying to put the puzzle pieces together here. If you're following along on a big board, maybe keep these traits in mind. But one thing is certain. Baltimore has the chance to completely change the future of the farm. Well, we're kind of up in the bird's nest now.
Right.
I don't know what to call this. We're in the podcast room. That's the magic of live television. We've transported across the hallway.
Right.
We're now here. I'm still in a little bit of shock.
Me too.
That the Orioles have selected Ike Irish with the 19th overall pick. 11th ranked prospect on MLB Pipeline, the 13th ranked prospect on Baseball America, and the 5th ranked prospect, according to Keith Law and The Athletic, goes number 19 to the Baltimore Orioles. Mentioned it on the show, but when we have talked to Matt Blood about the Orioles' general draft philosophy and how they like to go about things, Matt Blood has kind of said, yeah, somebody's going to fall to us. We know how we value guys, and somebody in this draft that we have higher up on our board is going to be available at pick 19. It's the same thing that happened last year with how they valued Vance Honeycutt, somebody who had some swing and miss concerns, but had just some elite traits in his game. He falls, in their mind, falls to them at number 20. Ike Irish, I mean, by all accounts, by the scouting reports, by whoever you talk to in the industry about Ike Irish, he falls a pretty long way to the Orioles at number 19. It's another catcher. He is a catcher-outfield hybrid. I'm sure we'll get more into that, but this is a darn good player that the Orioles select 19th overall.
Right. This is exactly, I think, how the Orioles would have wanted this to go. Like you mentioned, he falls incredibly to the Orioles at pick 19. You can also take a look at the other players that were grabbed in the same range as him right now. Kason Cunningham, who we talked a little bit about in the actual studio just across the hall, was selected right before him at pick 18 to the Diamondbacks. And then Andrew Fisher, a guy that we were talking about, you would just draft for the bat, not for the defense at all. He went 20th overall to the Brewers, and then you have Xavier Nyans, another guy that we were talking about, who I would have loved to see the Orioles grab if he were still available, but how can you not get an Ike Irish if he were there?
There's almost no other option when a player this good falls to the Orioles, and the interesting scenario that Baltimore finds themselves in is that with 4 picks in the top 37, 7 picks tonight, they have the largest bonus pool of any team in baseball this year, meaning they can hand out the most money to draft picks. And so Ike Irish is probably somebody who was anticipating a little bit of a larger payday than he would get with the slot value for number 19. And the Orioles are able to make that work because they have the most bonus pool money available to hand out to draft picks. So the Orioles just get a gift in Ike Irish. Somebody who there's not a lot of holes to find. I mean, it's fantastic stats from his junior season. He hit .364 with a .469 on-base percentage, slugged .710 with an OPS close to 1,200. Playing SEC baseball at Auburn.
Elite.
19 homers, 33 walks, 37 Ks. And again, we weren't unprepared for this draft by any measure. We had 50 guys on our board. We were ready to go. But Ike Irish is somebody that we barely talked about because by all indications, this guy was going to be a top 10, top 12 pick. There were no ifs, ands, or buts about it. This was a darn good prospect, and he's somehow available at 19. And you have to imagine sitting in that war room, the Orioles are just going, okay.
Right, did that
sure.
just happen?
I mean, kind of there goes the plans, right? You could talk about prospects like Jace Laviolette or Xavier Nyans or Andrew Fisher. Ike Irish is there.
Right.
Okay. Here he is.
It's an unreal. Great. And when I was talking to Sig Meidel earlier this week, he mentioned kind of once you get to the actual draft day and you're in that war room, all the prep is already done. And at that point, it becomes a competition with all other major league teams of almost preparation and study and doing your homework, as the Orioles like to call it. And to me, it seems like the Orioles certainly did their homework, and who knows, maybe some other teams didn't necessarily found other players that fit more into their molds, but this is a guy that falls to the Orioles, and they had done their preparation and done their homework, and like you mentioned, expected to go higher on their board, but they really lucked out, and they got someone that was ranked 11th and 13th and 5th on The Athletic and falls to number 19. It's exactly what the Orioles could have wanted.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit more about Ike.
Sure.
As mentioned in the MASN All Access studios, he had a bit of a weird season. He was hit in the back by a pitch, fractures his scapula to start the year. And then when he came back, he mostly played the outfield. So I don't think there's a medical concern anywhere with teams. You know, maybe with a major injury like that, teams could look at him and say, oh, maybe that's why he falls a little bit. I'm not sure what the medicals look like. That is information that we are not privy to. But if you view him as a catcher, and by all accounts, he gets pretty good grades as a defensive catcher. It's at least above average stuff. The Athletic has him as a 45 grade receiver, which is not an awesome grade, but it's a decent enough grade where he is such a good hitter. We mentioned the stats. It's an advanced plate approach, really, really good power. If you have those kinds of offensive stats as a catcher, you are a surefire top 10 pick. There's no way around that. And so maybe there were some teams that viewed Ike Irish as just purely a corner outfielder. I don't know how much that changes your evaluation of him, though, because he didn't play in a ton of games this season, 55, and still hit 19 homers. You're looking at a lot of guys playing 60-plus games, and if you say they've got pretty good power, project for 2025 at the next level, you could be thinking, okay, that guy's got, 45, 50 power at least. Ike Irish graded at a 50 power. That's a really good power bat. And so as a corner outfielder, maybe I could see him as this mid-teens level pick that he ends up being. He ends up being late teens. But as a catcher, that dude's a top 10 pick. And so if that's what the Orioles have planned for him, that's a dude and a half. And if you're wondering, okay, the Orioles have catchers in Adley Rutschman and Samuel Basallo, I think there's a scenario that makes sense, right? First off, you're not drafting for need at the big league level. The Orioles have made that very clear, that you just draft the best player available and then you figure it out. There are so many steps between drafting the guy and getting him to the big league level that you don't really worry about what you need at the big league level, because that could be 3-4 years down the line and who knows what your needs are there. But let's throw a hypothetical out there, right? You have Adley Rutschman. You have Samuel Basallo. That is one of the better catchers in the game at his best in Adley Rutschman. We saw it for the last month of the season before he got injured. And the best catching prospect in the game in Samuel Basallo. You want those two guys in the lineup together as frequently as possible. Samuel Basallo is also getting a ton of work at first base currently for AAA Norfolk. I wouldn't be surprised at all if he gets a lot of reps at first base at the big league level. First base, DH, wherever you need him to play, get him in the lineup. You've now drafted Ike Irish, who is a very athletic catcher who can play a corner outfield, who maybe has some question marks on the defensive side as a catcher. But if he continues to develop at that position in pro ball, maybe he becomes a catcher who can go 2-3 times a week at the big league level. Samuel Basallo maybe turns into a catcher that catches 2 times a week at the big league level. Adley Rutschman could be a catcher that catches 3 times a week at the big league level. Those are all the days of the week. So you could, in theory, have 3 catchers on the roster, Ike Irish with some positional versatility, Samuel Basayo with some positional versatility, and then you could get Adley Rutschman off his feet because you have 2 guys who can catch the ball behind him. Feels like a pretty good formula. Who knows if that ends up happening, because that is years and years down the road, and again, at this point, you are just concerned with drafting a good player. But that's a nice thing to dream about if you're an Orioles fan.
Yeah, and it's definitely like we talk about all the time of how the draft isn't for current team needs. You can make that argument with pitching. You can make that argument with catching right now, as the Orioles have used the most amount of catchers in God knows how long.
Yeah.
But it fits that way where maybe it's a coincidence in the Orioles front office war room upstairs, but maybe it's also not, in the sense of, okay, you're getting a guy with that kind of defensive versatility. And I also want to point out the fact that he is the highest catcher on at least my draft board right now. The other 2 options that they could have gone with are much later down with Caden Bodine and Luke Stevenson, but those are 2 guys that you would be getting for their defense. They didn't really bring that much offensive upside in those 2 player profiles, but with Ike Irish, you're getting both.
Yeah.
You're getting defensive versatility in that outfield option. You're getting defensive versatility in that catcher option, and you're also getting a guy who has played with wooden bats in Cape Cod Baseball League. Has gotten on base with wooden bats at a 325 clip, and on top of that, has 19 home runs in the SEC when he didn't even play the entire season.
Yep.
This is no doubt a steal on both sides of the ball with Ike Irish.
Yeah, and if you tuned into my package about, hey, what kinds of traits do the Orioles look for in a position player, the number one thing that I highlighted, hard contact.
Yeah.
The Orioles like guys with loud exit velocities. Ike Irish, loud exit velocities. Baseball America, in their scouting report of Ike Irish, said he had a, quote, incredibly advanced offensive skill set.
Yeah.
So in his junior year, he cut down on the chase, only 37 strikeouts in 55 games. Really good bat on ball. Somebody who hit .364 in his junior season at Auburn with a .469 on base percentage. And you mentioned the Cape Cod League. Again, if you've been tuned in all night, you've heard this before, but the Cape Cod Baseball League is a really important thing in evaluating college prospects. The Cape Cod Baseball League is the summer league where the best collegiate talent goes to hone their skills. It is the definition of iron sharpening iron. You go, you play with wood bats, and you are facing some absolute dudes. Ike Irish, yes, you maybe would have liked to see a little bit more power, 2 homers in 62 career games on the Cape, but he hit .325 in his last 34 games there. That's really good. And again, if you are just joining us, as the Orioles have selected Ike Irish 19th overall with their first pick in the MLB Draft, this is one of the best prospects in this draft. The Athletic ranked him 5th, Baseball America 13th, and MLB Pipeline 11th. A left-handed hitter who can do a ton of damage at the plate, projects to be a 20 to 25 home run guy at the next level. Good athlete. Somebody who has played a lot of outfield along with catching as well, but it's an advanced offensive approach, a great athlete, and somebody who falls to the Orioles at number 19. And once again, it almost feels a little reminiscent, if you're a Ravens fan as well.
Right.
What do the Ravens do every draft? They sit there and they wait for the best player available. They did it this year with Malachi Starks, the safety out of Georgia, was probably the best player available, and the Ravens just sat back and said, yeah, we'll take him.
Right.
And here comes Ike Irish, 19th overall to the Baltimore Orioles, was the best player available. If you are following along with the MLB Draft Tracker, you will see that he was picked 19th, and he was their 11th ranked prospect. The guys that go behind him, Andrew Fisher is a name that we talked about, goes to the Brewers at number 20. He was MLB Pipeline's 29th ranked prospect. Xavier Nyans goes 21st. Another guy that was connected to the Orioles, he was MLB Pipeline's 25th ranked prospect. After that, you have prospects ranked 39, 27, and 50 as the Tigers select Jordan Yost, another high school shortstop. We're getting closer to the Orioles' next pick at number 30, but
guess
again,
who's still available? I don't want to jinx it, But our
favorite
other
outfielder
favorite guy
from Texas A&M, Jace Laviolette.
I really don't want to jinx it, but we are getting ever so close to the 30th pick, and Jace Laviolette could still be available. And if he is, and if the Orioles take that opportunity, then that is going to be 2 huge steals.
Yeah, I do think it's interesting, too, looking at this clump of 19,
Really
20,
interesting.
21, 22. This is a bunch of organizations that know how to draft.
Yeah.
And they know how to do it really well. So it's interesting to me. Even, I think you can throw the Diamondbacks into that category at number 18, just before the Orioles as well. They take Kason Cunningham, who is a high school bat that we really liked. Advanced approach at the plate, could hit for a ton of average. Orioles go Ike Irish. The Brewers take Andrew Fisher at number 20. I think if you were looking at mock drafts this morning, you probably saw Andrew Fisher go into the Orioles a lot at number 30. It was somebody that Baltimore apparently loved from chatting with those in the industry, somebody who crushed all of his pre-draft interviews at the MLB scouting combine. That's a dude out of Tennessee. As we mentioned, really good hitter. Doesn't bring a ton defensively because he probably profiles as a first baseman. I think he was announced as a third baseman.
Yeah, which is interesting.
Didn't see him at third base a ton at Tennessee. That's also because they had a lot of good infielders. But Andrew Fisher goes to the Brewers at number 20. It's a really advanced hitter, and I think the Orioles would have loved for him to be available at number 30, but another good drafting organization in Milwaukee gets him at 20.
What's interesting, too, about the picks that follow the Orioles is a lot of guys that were selected for earlier on than they were kind of ranked in MLB pipeline. You mentioned the Andrew Fisher, who was ranked 29th, the Xavier Nyans, who was 25th. You name it, Jordan Yost, who was 50th and gets selected 24th overall. So those are good news for those guys. But the other interesting thing when we had discussed this draft class as a whole is the strength of it, especially when you look at the depth of high school shortstops and just high school hitters in general. A lot of these guys on the board right now are high school shortstops. And the Orioles, of course, get their college position player, like we know that they tend to get. But at the same time, with the way that the draft class is shaken out and the way it was predicted to shake out, that meant that these college bats would probably still be available come pick 19, which is also probably why Ike Irish is still available, because you had guys like Kason Cunningham, Daniel Pierce go off the board, Gavin Feen go off the board much earlier than we thought as well. So it just kind of shaked out the way where you were either going to get the Orioles to play towards the strength of the draft and get a high school hitter early on, or you were going to be lucky and have a college hitter that was ranked much higher than your pick number just fall into your lap, and that's the way it went.
Man, to be a fly on the wall when the Diamondbacks were up at number 18, the Orioles just got to be licking their chops there. Between Kason Cunningham, Ike Irish, Andrew Fisher, Xavier Nyans, just take your pick of the favorite one, and I'm sure Ike Irish was just much higher on that board than a lot of those other guys. Those other prospects are darn good prospects. Kason Cunningham was ranked 14th, according to MLB Pipeline. Andrew Fisher, Xavier Nyans, guys that we liked a lot. But Ike Irish, again, the 11th ranked prospect, according to MLB Pipeline. The 5th ranked prospect, according to The Athletic. There are still some good prospects available. Brendan Summerhill, an outfielder from Arizona. Not a guy we've mentioned a lot because he doesn't really fit the Orioles mold with what they like to do. It's still a solid outfield bat, but not a ton of power potential. 44 games in 2025, 4 homers, 12 doubles, 6 triples. He's going to get on base. It's an advanced approach. Only 24 strikeouts in those 44 games. A .358 on base percentage on the Cape Cod League. Those are all really good things. It's just not the power tool that you normally see the Orioles go with. However, a couple of guys available that do have the power tool that the Orioles usually go with. 17th ranked prospect, Vahiva Aloy. 20th ranked prospect, Jace Laviolette. And they would be a darn good complement to Ike Irish.
Yeah, and you also mentioned we talked about the pitchers and the availability for getting a pitcher at maybe the 19th pick. We mentioned it earlier on in the show, right before the 19th pick was announced. But Cruz Schoolcraft, a high school pitcher, a left-handed pitcher, goes to the San Diego Padres at pick number 25. And this one is interesting because you always hear, okay, let the Orioles draft an arm early on, and this is going to be the year. If if there ever was one, that the Orioles will do that, just given that they have 4 picks. But Cruz Schoolcraft is a very, very interesting guy. This guy is 6'8", 229 pounds.
Yep.
At 18 years old, coming out of high school in Oregon as a lefty. So I think that when you have someone like that, you were kind of expecting him to go early on.
Yeah.
I don't know if the Orioles were going to be the player to take that bet, just given their track record. But I still would prefer the Orioles to get an Ike Irish over a Cruz Schoolcraft any day.
High school arms are tricky. There are so many steps for a high school arm to make the big leagues.
Right.
Especially in this day and age with just how many pitching injuries there are. A high school pitcher, a lot of things have to go well for them to get to the big leagues. And we are getting a lot of comments about pitching. So let's have the pitching conversation.
Okay, let's do it.
The Orioles have not selected a pitcher with their first selection in the draft in the Mike Elias era. They have not selected a pitcher particularly high in the Mike Elias era. The highest selected pitcher that they picked under Mike Elias was Jackson Baumeister, who was a second-round pick back in 2023. He went to the Orioles and then was eventually traded to the Tampa Bay Rays in the package that got you Zach Eflin. He was the 24th pick of the second round. He is the highest selected pitcher in the Mike Elias era. The Orioles have 4 picks in the top 37. We are going to be hopping back over to our studio to bring you picks 30 and 31. There's a possibility that a pitcher goes there.
Yeah.
I don't think it's a particularly strong possibility.
Right.
If I were a betting man and said, hey, where could the Orioles select a pitcher? I think 37 is probably the best bet.
Agreed.
For a few different reasons. One, the Orioles know what their philosophy is, and they know what works. They know that they can draft hitters, and they can develop them, and they can turn them into good prospects and into good players. They know, bouncing off of that point, that they can turn hitters into good prospects that they can then flip for a pitcher. Because with where the Orioles are right now, and you're hoping to come back next year, compete, be in that conversation, I think a pitcher that the Orioles potentially could have gone with number 30 just goes off the board in Gage Wood to the Philadelphia Phillies. He was a name I was quite literally about to mention. If you remember Gage Wood from his College World Series fame, he was the one who threw the no-hitter for Arkansas.
16.7 strikeouts per 9
Pretty good.
Very
That
good.
fits the Orioles profile as well as somebody who is just going to strike out a bunch of guys, but he is off the board to the Philadelphia Phillies. Anyway, back to the point we were talking about with pitchers there. The Orioles know they can draft hitters, develop them, turn them into top prospects, and then trade them for pitchers. We saw it with Joey Ortiz, who was a 4th-round selection by the Orioles back in 2019. He eventually develops into a top 100 prospect that you trade along with DL Hall for Corbin Burns. Kyle Stowers and Connor Norby were, of course, dealt to Miami. Kyle Stowers, pretty good day today, gets dealt to Miami in exchange for Trevor Rogers, and Trevor Rogers is having an unbelievable season. You know that you can do that and do that effectively. You have had a harder time developing pitchers. That's not a secret, but you also haven't really given yourself the opportunity to develop top pitching talent because you're just not developing those guys. So it's a bit of a give and take there because on the one hand, sure, I guess you could say there haven't been a lot of pitchers that the Orioles have developed that have made the big leagues, but also they haven't really tried it. So are you just going to stick with the strategy that works with position players? Do you know if the strategy of drafting pitchers doesn't work? There's a lot that goes into it, but I think the case in point is that the Orioles know what they can do well, and what they can do well is draft hitters.
Right, and I think every team across the major leagues would do the same thing. Like, I don't think many teams in the big leagues or just in MLB would try to go against what they know works for them and what they've done well. Because if you get a guy like Gunnar Henderson in the same range as right now, and it goes pretty well. Pretty is an understatement, but if you also get a guy like Jordan Westburg and it goes pretty well, then I think you should probably stick to that same strategy. But again, I think that there also is a lot of opportunity for drafting pitchers later on. I mean, Braxton Bragg is a very crucial example of that. He was He was drafted in the 8th round of 2023 by the Orioles at pick 241, and right now he has a whip of exactly 1,000.
And he's just got to stay healthy. That's the thing with pitchers
and
in the minor leagues.
thing.
You have to stay healthy for so long, and pitcher injuries are so prevalent that it's just so hard to avoid, and it's hard to spend high draft capital on those guys when you know the injuries are, I don't want to say an inevitability, but it's almost feeling that way with how prevalent pitcher injuries are at this point.
Right, but there are still a number of pitchers that are on the board that we've looked at that could go towards the Orioles for one of these 30, 31, 37 picks, and one that I like is Anthony Ianson, right-handed pitcher from LSU, ranked 40th on MLB Pipeline right now, so probably could fit in that 37th pick role, but
he has 30 or 31 too. We don't want to rule that out.
That is true, but he has a 65 grade slider. His slider is definitely his bread and butter pitch. A 3 flat ERA in 18 starts, a 33.9% strikeout rate, and 8% walk rate. That K rate was 3rd in Division I for those Ks. So this is a guy that has experience with a College World Series national champion team, and he was one of those guys that was paired with Cade Anderson as that 1-2 pitcher punch-out combo. So I would really like to see Anthony Ianson if you were to get a pitcher.
Yeah, if you were looking at college arm, I think Anthony Ianson is a really good way to go. You mentioned the slider, the 65 grade there. When you are evaluating prospects, you're on a 20 to 80 scale. Anything above a 50 is good.
Is great.
55, pretty good. You can scale it up there by 5s, right? 65 is a grade that you do not see very often. We're talking, Enrique Bradfield Jr.'s, Enrique Bradfield Jr.'s speed was like an 80, so that's probably a bad example. But, if you're talking Adley Rutschman's hit tool coming out of Oregon State, maybe that's a 65 or a 70. A 65 is a darn good grade. Anthony Ianson fits the Orioles mold with what they like to do with pitchers. You mentioned close to 13 Ks per 9. Another college arm that fits that similar mold is Patrick Forbes. And pitchers are very different to evaluate in the MLB draft because if you're looking at just the ERA for Patrick Forbes at a 4.51 for Louisville, you might be saying, why are you talking about this guy as a potential top 30, 35 pick in this draft? I don't really care about the 4.51 ERA, and I don't think the Orioles will either. What they care about is the 14.8 strikeouts per 9 innings. He struck out 117 dudes in 15 starts this year. Stuff guy. And yeah, the control could be better, but a 60 grade fastball, 55 slider. Whew. Yeah, Patrick Forbes.
Yeah, and you mentioned the stuff, and the control could be better, but still 117 Ks to 34 walks is pretty darn good.
That'll do.
But the sad part right now is that Jace Laviolette has just come off the board, unfortunately. But there goes that idea and dream of having Jace Laviolette and Ike Irish in the same draft.
Jace Laviolette goes 27th to the Cleveland Guardians. We are shaking our fist at the sky. Jace Laviolette, if he had fallen to number 30 for the Baltimore Orioles, could have been a great pick. Not to be.
Yeah.
Royals also made their pick at number 28. Josh Hammond, which means the Orioles are getting pretty close to getting back on the clock. And who better to talk about what the Orioles could do at number 30 and their overall draft strategy than the head of things, Matt Blood. Let's hear from him before the Orioles selection at number 30.
Well, it's a pleasure to be joined here on MASN All Access by Matt Blood, the Orioles Vice President, Player Development and Domestic Scouting. And Matt, I want to start there because last year when we talked before the draft, that domestic scouting part was new. And now you have a year under your belt with that new title. What have you learned over the past season?
Just a lot of, getting to know the people, getting to know our general processes, getting to know the little things that you just aren't aware of before you actually take the job. And year one is always one of the more difficult years in any role that you're in. So year two, feels a little more easy, but there are also little things that we want to adjust and try to improve.
Yeah, and it's year one in that new role, but you've obviously been with the organization for a long time on the player development side of things. So I kind of want to ask there, you have seen players that you've drafted now have big league careers. You have seen guys come into the minor leagues and maybe have a bit of a harder time. What have you learned about the guys that you have drafted in terms of what makes a player successful and some commonalities among those guys?
Well, I mean, generally players with tools and players that are good at playing the game usually do pretty well. In our system, the way that we train and the way that we practice, the players who lean into our style of practice usually advance faster than others. We like to train very similar to the game. And so those players who like that type of thing usually do better. But ultimately, it's the guys that can play defense, the guys that can hit the ball hard, make contact, make good swing decisions. They generally perform well.
Yeah, and with your background leading player development, you know firsthand what kinds of guys succeed down on the farm. How valuable has that been over this process now that you're going into the scouting side of things to say, hey, I know what ticks for these guys who develop well?
It's definitely helpful. When I first started in the industry, I was a scout. So I have some experience in draft rooms and just doing that job. But then also being on the player development side, it gives you a look into what it takes, to make it through the minor leagues and to the major leagues. And so just having that well-rounded perspective, I think, is an advantage for me.
Yeah, and when you're talking about a draft prospect, there's always kind of the two things of tools and projectability versus guys that we maybe consider, gamers. They've got the intangibles. And obviously in an ideal world, you're looking for a great combination of those two things. But how have you found yourself kind of weighing those two factors?
That's a tough question. I mean, ultimately, we want major league players. So we need players that have major league skill as well as major league mindset, and ideally you can find players with both, but there are all different types of players that have made it to the major leagues and have been successful, so there's no really one specific way to slice and dice it.
Yeah, and obviously you guys aren't drafting in the top 5 anymore, but you haven't needed to draft guys like Gunnar Henderson and Jordan Westberg. This year you sit at 19, 30, and 31. On those two topics there, the projectability and tools versus the intangibles, how much more of a challenge is it to find it at the back half of the first round, a good combination of those two things? And is there any difference in weighing those two when you're at the back half of the first round versus maybe, hey, a blue chip prospect towards the top of the draft?
I don't think so. It's just each pick we're trying to make the best bet we can, and we look at the players that are available. And we look at all the information that we have, their performance, our scouting reports, the intangibles, and we do our best to project out which player has the best chance, and that's the one that we're going to draft.
As I mentioned, you have those 3 picks in the top 31.
Draft in professional sports, we think of current team needs. Take the Baltimore Ravens, for example. This year with the first-round pick, they drafted the versatile Georgia safety Malachi Starks, who, yes, fits the Ravens' best player available model in the first round of the draft, but he also fills a need to bolster Baltimore's secondary, and he will likely make an immediate impact in the upcoming season. Baseball, though, is different. It is unlike any other sport. The MLB Draft allows teams to pick from several different pools of players. You have your high school hitters, which is what this draft class is full of. You have the college hitters, which we know Baltimore tends to like, and you also have your high school and college arms. You could say that right now a current need for the Orioles is pitching, but these players drafted won't become big league contributors for at least a year or so, just given how crucial the development process is in this sport.
The minor leagues are so many players and it takes time, and so it would be foolish to draft for just pure need of where we're kind of short in the minor leagues, because things can change. It takes enough time to where that's really not a good strategy. So we're just going to go for the best player we can get.
That's why there's this approach of draft the bat, trade for the arms, an approach the Orioles seem to follow and do very well.
We know that Baltimore doesn't like to go after college pitching. I don't know if they're going to have a lot of access to college pitching with where they're selecting, so I would expect that high school shortstop class and some of those advantageous college position players that are going to fall down the board a little bit to be targets for Baltimore.
The draft picks are opportunities to bring really good players into the organization. And yeah, you may keep them and draft them and develop them, and that may take 2 or 3 years. You may trade them that winter, and that can impact the team. So this is just, hopefully, we're going to see what we do with the pick.
While there are a number of bats that could fit the mold for the Orioles at pick 19, this year is a very unique draft for the Orioles, as they now have 4 picks in the first 37. Mike Elias was asked on Thursday just how likely it is for them to draft a pitcher in the early stages.
We're going to line up the board based on how we think the talent is, and we'll take in that regard, but we definitely want to get some pitching in this draft.
Regardless of how this year's draft shakes out for Baltimore's first 4 picks, one thing tends to stay true across the nature of the MLB Draft and other pro sports drafts, and that's the importance of best player available.
Draft the bats. That is the strategy that the Orioles go with picks 30 and 31. At pick number 30, they draft Caden Bodine, the catcher out of Coastal Carolina, and at pick 31, the Golden Spikes Award winner, Vahiva Aloy. And I want to talk more about Aloy because this is somebody with huge power potential at the shortstop position, and by all accounts, one of the best defenders in this draft as well. Just everything about Vahiva Aloy. There's a reason he won the award for the best college baseball player in the nation, Annie.
This is a guy that you could easily slot into this lineup and this roster right now and feel completely comfortable with where his defense is in the infield, probably comparable to Gunnar Henderson, Jackson Holliday, right now at the level that he is. But you are getting him also for that offense in this year in 2025, he did both. He was on both sides of the ball. When you look at Caden Bodine, he didn't necessarily bring that. He brings you a safe bet behind the dish on defense. Ike Irish does the same thing as Aloy, where he gives you both on offense and on defense, But Vahiva Aloy is another one like Ike Irish that fell to the Orioles at pick 31, where the Orioles right now are getting very, very lucky with how their draft boards are going.
I think if you are in that Orioles war room right now, you are thrilled with how the draft board has been shaking out for you. Caden Bodine at number 30 as well. This is a catcher, a switch hitter, 60 grade hit tool. It's going to be a great plate approach. Hit .318 with a .454 on base percentage during his final season at Coastal. 47 walks, just 24 strikeouts in 67 games, only 5 homers, but you know what the average is going to potentially do for him at the next level. He comes into professional baseball as a polished hitter with an outstanding plate approach, and he can hit .384 career average in 26 games at the Cape Cod League. That dude knows how to put bat on baseball.
And he won't necessarily be the type of slugger, but he's a very similar kind of player profile to previous drafts like Vance Honeycutt and Enrique Bradfield Jr. Enrique was most likely never going to be a slugger, but when he gets on base, he is sure to get on base once he steps up to the plate. Caden Bodine's the same way. He's not necessarily going to be that home run hitter type of guy, but the Orioles have seemed to veer away a little bit from the power guys and the power upside type of guys, but go for the hit tools. And that's what we've seen a lot in most recent drafts. But right now with Vahiva Aloy and Caden Bodine, you get a little bit of mixture of both and some defensive versatility on all three of these picks too, because a lot of the Orioles' first round picks and early on picks in most recent drafts have been down the middle outfielders, but with Aloy you get a little bit of both, and same with Ethan Anderson last season, Ike Irish, and Caden Bodine behind the dish.
Yeah, the Orioles go with 3 position players with their first 3 picks in the MLB Draft. They've got another one coming up in just a few selections at pick number 37. But that'll do it for us here on MASN All Access. Thank you so much for tuning in to our marathon show. The Orioles select Ike Irish, 19th overall, the catcher Caden Bodine at number 30, and the Golden Spikes Award winner Vahiva Aloy at number 31. A successful night for the Orioles so far, and it's only going to get better at number 37, and then 3 more picks after that in the following rounds to wrap up the night. But that'll wrap things up for us here on MASN All Access. A big thank you to Keith DeJesus, to Amy Jennings behind the scenes for helping to produce this one. For Annie Klaff, I am Brendan Mortensen. Thank you so much for tuning in to our live Orioles draft show that has been presented by Long Fence. Touch all the bases and score big. For great savings, visit longfence.com.